The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, greetings. Welcome to another presentation in this public service nation-building series, The Law and You. This is program number 951, coming to you on Monday the 7th of October 2019. On this program, I will speak to you on the topic, the supremacy of God. The supremacy of God. But before getting into the topic, a few preliminary comments. Firstly, and as usual, I would like to send out my condolences to all families which have suffered recent bereavements, and in particular, the family of the late carnival icon, Mr. Owen Ralph. Secondly, I want to alert you that next week's program of the Law and You DV will be a special, in that I will be having two guests with me on the program discussing a very important topic, namely mediation. Now, next week has been labeled National Mediation Week, and the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court has encouraged the states comprising the jurisdiction of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court to publicize the concept of mediation. There is a National Mediation Committee chaired by one of the local judges, Her Ladyship Justice Esco Henry. And that committee has organized a series of activities for next week. So officially, the week would last from the 13th of October to the 19th. On the 13th, there will be a church service. On Monday, the 14th, a special program of the Law and You, with two persons who are steeped in mediation. I will be chairing a panel discussion, as it were, between those two eminent persons. Then on Wednesday night, there will be a lecture at French's house at 7:30 on the topic of mediation. On Thursday, members of the public would be able to go to the old public library in Kingstown next to Heritage Square for an informal legal aid clinic. So if you have legal questions to ask, and it hasn't got to be on mediation, whatever legal questions you have to ask, you can go there, and there will be lawyers who would be giving you of their time freely. And on Friday, at the House of Assembly, beginning at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there will be a dramatization of a mock mediation. Now, I have spoken on the topic of mediation twice in recent times, but I'm happy to know that we're having a whole week of activities devoted to the theme of mediation. And I want to thank the National Mediation Committee, and especially the enthusiastic leadership of Madam Justice Henry and the members of the Mediation Committee for organizing these events next week. And you will hear more about them on the radio and on television as the week goes by. Final preliminary comment. for those of us who still love our cricket, even though we have gone cold on West Indies cricket because of the recent performances of the team in the last few years. But I have been following the CPL, got to see quite a few of the recent matches. And my congratulations to the finalists, which are the Guyana Amazon Warriors and either the Trinidad Knight Riders or the Barbados Tridents. Barbados and Trinidad will be having their playoff on Thursday to decide which goes through to the final on Saturday to meet the Amazon Warriors. But I tell you, the Amazon Warriors have broken all sorts of records. It's the first time in the history of the CPL that a team has gone through all the preliminary matches without losing one. They have played 11 matches so far, and they have won every single match they have played. And I'm looking forward to the match on Saturday. Now, to me, the only thing against the Warriors would be the law of averages. Because the law of averages states that in any series of events, a team taking part is entitled to one bad match. And supporters of the Warriors would be hoping that that one bad match would not be on the final when they play against the winner of Trinidad or Barbados. My only disappointment with the Warriors is that of the performance of Hetmeyer. Hetmeyer is billed as an up-and-coming young West Indian star. But to me, he is totally unreliable. He gives away his wicket with the most silly shots, and as if his head is only made to be decorated by the brilliant colors in which he dyes the top of his head. So if he plays, he owes the team some runs. But for now, as far as I'm concerned, Hetmeyer has been disappointing. He hasn't lived up to his promises, and the team should really be ready to sue him for breach of promise. Anyway, I am a Warriors fan, but I also like the cricket played by Trinidad and Barbados. So whichever two teams end up in the final, that'll be fine with me. I just hope that rain would not spoil the fun, and we look forward to a lovely, lovely day. What a brilliant century made by Brandon King for the Warriors a couple days ago. Anyway, let me get into the topic for the evening. Please excuse me. The supremacy of God. You may think that I'm going to discuss theology. No. I'm going to discuss law, constitutional law. I'm not equipped for theological argumentation because I'm not a theologian. The phrase, the supremacy of God, I take it from the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And let me read you what our Constitution says. This is the very beginning of the Constitution. Whereas the peoples of the islands of St. Vincent, who are known as Vincentians, have affirmed that the nation is founded on the belief in the supremacy of God and the freedom and dignity of man. And it goes on with other concepts. But that is what I want to concentrate on, because our Constitution has said very clearly that we Vincentians have affirmed, that is, we believe firmly in the fact or the concept that our nation, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, is founded on the belief in the supremacy of God and the freedom and the dignity of man. And if our Constitution says that the foundation of our nation is belief in the supremacy of God, you would expect that we would manifest in our national laws the principles founded on the law of God, because the supremacy of God must mean the supremacy of the Word of God. In other words, our Constitution is telling us at the beginning that this nation is founded on our belief in the supremacy of the Word of God. The Word of God, according to our Constitution, is supreme, higher than any other concept. Therefore, you would expect that in our country, the laws of God would be put at a higher level than the laws of man. Because if God is supreme, and if His Word is supreme, then His laws must be supreme as well. They must take precedence over the laws made by man. But interestingly enough, you will find those words in the constitutions of many other nations, and in particular the constitutions of nations in the Caribbean. Those words are found in the Constitution of Belize. Those words are found in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago and other Caribbean countries. Belief in the supremacy of God. God is supreme. So the Constitution says. But really and truly, does the Constitution mean what it says? And that is the question. What have the judges in the courts have had to say about the supremacy of God? The answer is, as far as my researches are concerned, and I can't claim to have done research pertaining to every country in the world that has the supremacy of God in its constitution. But in all my researches, I have not come across a single case in which the judiciary has had to rule on the phrase, the supremacy of God. In other words, even though that phrase is the cornerstone of our Constitution, as far as I know, that phrase has never been judicially interpreted. But the time is coming in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where the judiciary will have to pronounce on what does that phrase mean. What does the supremacy of God mean in St. Vincent and the Grenadines? The judiciary here, the High Court and the Court of Appeal, would have to say what it means, because there are two cases pending before the High Court in this country in which the concepts of man clash with the concepts of the Word of God. The two cases, I understand, have been consolidated. They'll be heard together. But in those cases, people are saying, the claimants are saying, that the laws which criminalize buggery are unconstitutional and they should be changed. Therefore, the cases pose a challenge to the laws of buggery. But the laws of buggery are based on the Word of God. So we are told by the Bible, which is the Word of God. And the judiciary will have to choose an interpretation of the phrase, the supremacy of God, as between whether it means what the Word of God says or if it means what man wants it to mean, or if man doesn't ascribe any importance to the words, the supremacy of God, at all. Now, you would appreciate that there is a rule that when a matter is before the court as a live matter, it is not proper for persons to discuss the matter in any great detail. But I consider it proper for me to put in context the challenge which those cases pose to the Word of God. As I said before, I have not seen any interpretation of the phrase, the supremacy of God. So we'll have to wait and hear what the judges have to tell us as to whether that phrase just represents words which we use without meaning them, or whether that phrase is a phrase that contains the substance, the nub of our belief as a nation. So that in the hearing, we would expect to hear submissions about the interpretation of the concept of the supremacy of God, in which we say we believe according to our Constitution. Our Constitution says, we, the peoples of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who are known as Vincentians, have affirmed that the nation is founded on the belief in the supremacy of God and the freedom and dignity of man. The question is, where it is alleged that the freedom of man is being circumscribed by certain laws, the question will arise very squarely to be answered as to which is more important, the supremacy of God or the freedom of man. In other words, must man bend his laws to suit the supremacy of God, or must the supremacy of God give way to the alleged freedom of man? And to me, that is the fundamental principle which the cases will have to address, and the judges will have to address. And the judges will have to tell us if the supremacy of God means anything at all in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The judges will have to tell us if the Word of God carries any meaning, and if so, whether that meaning is compatible with the challenge brought against the laws pertaining to buggery. The challengers say that their freedom is being jeopardized by certain laws. And when you look at those laws are based fundamentally on what God has said in His Word, the Bible. And we would hope that there would be decisions made in the case that would clarify the situation for us, at least in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I mentioned Belize and Trinidad and Tobago. In those countries which have the supremacy of God in their constitution as the fundamental foundation for the nation of Belize and the nation of Trinidad and Tobago, the courts in those countries ruled without discussing the meaning of the supremacy of God, ruled against the buggery laws, similar to the laws we have here, not identical, but similar. And no attempt was made by the judiciary in those countries, as far as I can see, and I read the judgment from the courts in Belize, I read the judgment from the court in Trinidad and Tobago. There was no analysis of what is meant by the supremacy of God. Now, when we go to law school, we are trained that law is law and morality is morality, and they are not necessarily to be equated. So we are trained as young people coming up in the legal system, law school, university. We are told that you look for the law and don't concern yourself with morality, because morality is a fluid concept. It depends on one person's view of what is moral and another person's view of what is moral or is not moral. And therefore, throughout the ages, judges have studiously avoided making pronouncements which appear to be definitive of a position on morality, so that judges are trained, and we as lawyers are trained, and then lawyers become judges, to look and see what the law means and apply the law. And if the law appears to clash with values or with morality, then you forget about the values and the morality. You apply the word of the law. It remains to be seen what is going to happen here. Because the laws are made by man. And very many laws made by man clash with the laws given by God. Simple as that. But when you go to court, the court will tell you, we are only concerned with the laws made by man. So, what has happened to the constitutional statement, principle, that we are founded on the belief in the supremacy of God? And throughout the legal system, you find very many concepts which are man-made, but which are incompatible with the concepts which are given by God as expounded in His Word. But we are taught and we are browbeaten into accepting that we only pay attention to what man has said in his laws. And so where they clash with the law of God, you follow the law of man. That is what has been the prevailing judicial ethos over the years, not just in St. Vincent and Grenadines, throughout the common law world. They say you have to separate religion from state. Don't mix the two. Well, the Constitution says that the state is founded on a religious concept. So the separation of religion from the state means you pay no attention to what religious beliefs people hold. You just bother with the laws that the state has provided. But the Constitution says we believe in the supremacy of God. So the Constitution is founded on a statement that is incompatible with the total separation of church and state. Now, I'm not saying that the state should be an adherent of any particular religion. And we have to separate belief in God from belief in religion. All of these matters will come for discussion before the judiciary, in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. But if the cases go on to the Privy Council, I have no expectation. The Privy Council is already set in its ways. They have a particular mindset. So you can take it for granted how the Privy Council would rule on these matters in controversy. They have their own beliefs. And it doesn't matter what arguments are made before the Privy Council, they will hold one point of view. And it will not be a point of view which supports the supremacy of God, I can tell you that. Interesting days are ahead. And we look forward to seeing how these matters will be resolved. So that is all for the topic. I remind you that next week is National Mediation Week, and on the lawn you will have an extended program. It would last for 45 minutes instead of the 30 minutes that we normally have for the program, and I will be having 2 guests on the program to discuss the subject of mediation. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, boys and girls, may the good Lord bless us all.
The Law and You, a look at laws in St. Vincent and the Grenadines which affect our daily lives. The Law and You, presented by lawyer panel P.R Campbell QC and brought to you on SVG-TV as a public service.